Ladies and gentlemen, the opioid plague is 21 years in the making. And it could actually be longer than that because one thing about America, they like to hide numbers or try to downplay numbers when it comes down to the public, but it's always far worse than anything they will ever tell you. So this comes out of Columbia, South Carolina, ABC Columbia, January 27th, 2020. There's still a lot of work to be done. Officials react to growing number of opioid deaths. So one thing about this plague, they certainly have never been able to conquer it as of yet. All right, let me see if I play. Let's see if this will play.
The number of opioid deaths that are happening across the state continues to rise. And the South Carolina Department of Alcohol and Other Drug Abuse Services says more than 1,000 people died due to overdoses in 2018 alone.
ABC Columbia's Tim Scott joins us live with why some say more work needs to be done to curb what they call a public health crisis. Tim?
Well, Josh and Rochelle, even though the number of opioid-related deaths in his county has dropped over the last 3 years, Gary Watts, the coroner of Richland County, says it's important to keep paying attention to something to what his team deals with on a frequent basis.
We've seen people under bridges, and we've seen people in million-dollar homes that are dying from overdoses.
Watts says his team sees as many as 2 opioid overdoses a week. Meanwhile, across the state, Ashley Bodiford of Laredac says the situation is much more dire.
It's safe to say that we are certainly dealing with a public health epidemic, a public health emergency, and the impact is people are dying, families are suffering, which really is the greatest impact of all. So there's still a lot of work to be done.
Laredac has received several grants, including one for $50,000 back in November, to find ways to clear up some confusion people might have about opioid use.
There's a large misconception that because opioids are prescribed, that means they're safe. But it's being aware and being able to communicate that opioids are safe when they are taken as prescribed.
Watts says a collaborative task force formed with law enforcement agencies 4 years ago has been effective in taking some of the suppliers off the streets. But he says it's going to take the work of more people to make a difference.
It's not just a law enforcement problem. It's our community's problem. I mean, we all know someone that's been addicted to pain medication. Some of us know people that have died because of that and gotten involved with other drugs. So it's not something that is just one part of our community. It's all of us that are affected by it.
And if you are someone who has been prescribed with opioids or know somebody who has taken opioids, it's important to remind them and yourself that you have to take the amount that you are prescribed and also to consider alternative health methods to treat your pain. Reporting live outside the Richland County Coroner's Office, Tim Scott, ABC Columbia News.
It's amazing how, ladies and gentlemen, I was, Kellyanne Conway actually did a press conference this morning and I was watching it. And one of the things that she said was everybody should be carrying Narcan. I just find that amazing. During the crack epidemic, nobody wanted to help the crack addicts. You didn't recognize the fact that they needed help and not jail. But all of a sudden, when the face of the addict changed, they need help. They don't need jail. They get drug court, not criminal court. It's amazing how you recognize all of these things now. But ladies and gentlemen, let's get into this article right now. The number of opioid deaths across the state continues to rise, and that is South Carolina. The South Carolina Department of Alcohol and Other Drug Abuse Services says more than 1,103 people died due to overdoses in 2018, with 816 involving opioids. Some counties in the Midlands have seen growth in the number of deaths, but Richland County saw a decline. According to the Richland County Coroner's Office, 71 people died from opioid-related deaths in 2019, down from 90 in 2017, even though the number of deaths in his county has gradually gone down over the last 3 years. Richland County Coroner Gary Watts says opioid deaths are something his department has to deal with on a regular basis. So they said they're averaging 2 deaths per week at this coroner's office. So this is just in one location. This is Richland County in South Carolina. We've seen people under bridges, people in $1 million homes that are dying from overdoses, Watts says. Watts says his team sees as many as 2 opioid overdoses a week. Meanwhile, across the state, Ashley Bodiford of LRADIC, an organization that focuses on alcohol abuse and drug treatment, says the situation is much more dire. It is safe to say that we are dealing with a public health epidemic, a public health emergency, and the impact is people are dying, families are suffering, which really is the greatest impact of all. So there's still a lot of work to be done, Bodiford said. Erratic has received several grants, including one for $50,000 back in November, to find ways to clear up some confusion people might have about opioid use. There's a big misconception that opioids are prescribed. That means they're safe, but it's being aware and being able to communicate the opioids are safe if they are taken as prescribed, Bodiford said. So, ladies and gentlemen, the thing is, they have not done much as far as prescribing things that are non-addictive. So in many cases, they are still giving opioids. Let me tell you something. I had my wisdom tooth taken out in October. They gave me a script for opioids. Okay, I got a script for opioids. And I ended up not taking it. And I used alternative ways to, take my pain away. But it is still heavily prescribed out here. So, right now they want to give people a painkiller, but they have not found anything that can take pain away like opioids and where they can just eliminate the drug altogether. This is why it doesn't matter. If you get surgery right now, you're going to get opioids. Even if you have a hospital stay, you're going to get opioids because they don't know what else to do. They really don't. Their hands are really tied on this whole thing. Watts says a collaborative task force formed with law enforcement agency 4 years ago has been effective at taking some of the suppliers off the street, but he says it's going to take the work of more people to make a difference. It is not just a law enforcement problem, it's our community problem. We all know someone that's been addicted to pain medication. Some of us know people who have died because of that, or they got involved with other drugs. It's not just something that affects some in our community. It's all of us who are affected by it, Watts says. Health experts say if someone is prescribed opioids, make sure they take the amount prescribed to them or to consider alternative medication methods that are not as addictive. So, ladies and gentlemen, the struggle with the opioid plague is still on. It really is. And I think they have made this worse. This is just my opinion. When they said it's a public health issue, I really believe they've made it worse. Now you have, the average addict just don't take one drug. They usually take multiple drugs, y'all. That's how they end up at the coroner's office. It's not unusual for many of these people to take drugs and alcohol, and they end up dying. Fentanyl has played a huge role in many of the deaths. As far as opioid deaths, fentanyl laced in the opioids is a big killer. And we know all of that fentanyl comes out of China. And then a lot of it makes it across the border from Mexico. And it's distributed all over the country, via dealers. A lot of these drugs are on the dark web. And that's still a real powerful place for people to go to buy all kinds of illegal drugs. So this is a mess. And it will continue to be a mess all through 2020. Nothing has changed. We're just in a different year. Like I said, I was listening to Kellyanne Conway. She was on Washington Post Live, and she was talking about the opioid epidemic and how it's going to take everybody to help. And, everybody should be walking around with Narcan. And I'm like, no, everybody shouldn't be walking around with Narcan, you know, but don't be surprised if more pharmacies this year start giving out Narcan for free. You know, they want everybody to give them a hand with their drug addicts, but during the crack epidemic, they gave us a hand by throwing all of ours in jail. And many people are still sitting there, and all they had was a drug addiction problem. And they are still sitting in jail to this very day from the crack epidemic because of Bill Clinton's 3 strikes, you're outlaw. They are in there. Many of them are in there for the rest of their lives. And their main problem was drug addiction. So America is very disingenuous when it comes down to drug addiction. As long as the drug addict is white, let's call it a public health issue and everybody roll up your sleeves and dive in there and help. But when those drug addicts are black, it goes to criminal court and everybody goes to jail. Until you clear up that issue, then you're going to always see a problem with your opioid public health issue, whatever the hell you're calling it. You never want to look at the real problem. You always want to deal with the superficial part of the problem. And this is why you're not clearing up this opioid plague. But you don't listen to people like me. And it's not up to me to clear up your problems, just like it's not up to you to clear up mine. But ladies and gentlemen, please tell me what you think. Please leave your comment and subscribe. Don't forget to hit on the notification bell, and I'll see you on the next video. Peace, family.